All right, well, I guess we're going to go. Thanks everyone for coming out today. I'm Doug with Krunchbox. Might know many of you on the call. I'm here with my colleague Ryan, who many of you will know as well. And I'm going to introduce you today to our latest, let's call him colleague in crime, but partner from Magnetic Data Science, Zack Pike. What we want to do today is just introduce you to a new program enhancement that we've developed at Krunchbox. And this program enhancement is going to help customers like you begin to really understand what happens in certain markets and certain stores with your products. So the idea behind this came about from conversations with Zach, where we talked about if a supplier could really segment their stores and understand which ones had high potential down to those that I call are on autopilot, would you approach your retailer with a bit of a different plan? So would you spend your promotional dollars differently? Would you invest in end caps in only high performing stores? Would you change your inventory or your POG in those stores that offer you very little opportunity to enhance your business? And so I'm going to turn it over to Zach here. He'll introduce himself, give you a bit about his background, because he is the person that's going to help us dig into the data and the additional data sets that will bring to life where these opportunities lie. We'll walk through that today. Ryan's going to monitor the chat for any questions, and we'll wrap up with this in about 20 to 30 minutes, depending on questions. So Zach, over to you, pal.
Yeah. Thanks for having me on, Doug. I appreciate it, and happy to talk to everybody. You should be seeing my screen. Doug, can you confirm that for me?
I'm just going to switch it over here.
Yeah, while you're switching that over. So just a little bit of background on Magnetic and me. I think Doug mentioned my name is Zack Pike, and Magnetic is a data science consultancy, and we work specifically with consumer goods brands that are sold in large retail networks, kind of the omni-channel thing, but we do a lot of stuff in the brick and mortar world. And our whole focus is to solve those tough growth challenges. And we use some pretty fancy data science stuff to do it. Doug kind of alluded to this, but we do a lot of work in helping you gain a better understanding of your retail partner store system. The whole point of that is to optimize your allocation of resources so that you can drive growth. Okay, so I'm going to take you through just a little bit on what the capabilities of this are. And then I'm going to talk about a case study, a real example, real data, real product in actually Lowe's. And hopefully that'll give you some background on what we're talking about here. All right, Doug, are we good on the view there?
I think we're good on the view.
Okay, great. So this slide here explains why we do this. And I'm preaching to the choir here, I know, but the retail world is complete chaos. If you are in like even one large retailer, you're dealing with over 1,000 locations. And the reality is each of those locations has like a varying level of opportunity in front of it. They've got varying levels of risks, and your product performs differently location by location. And there are actually reasons for that. And that's what we focus on. Two of the questions I get all the time are what's driving my sales and where's my opportunity? If you knew those two things, and hopefully some of you do, but if you knew those two things, you can make better decisions on how you allocate marketing dollars, merchandising activity, field sales team activity, your standard sales team activity. There's all kinds of stuff that this influences. And before I get into it, a couple of the two biggest benefits that I hear when I'm talking to clients about this stuff after we've done the work, I already talked about smarter allocation of resources, right? You've got this pool of budget or pool of resources that you can allocate out across your different retailers, across the country, across your stores to try and drive impact, right? We want to increase sales or at least retain what we've got. This enhances that, but also stronger partnerships with your retailers, right? Managing the relationship between your buyer and you as the brand can be really stressful, and that stress, ebbs and flows over time. And like in my experience, the stronger the partnership is in that realm, the better off everything happens with the product, right? We get better merchandising activity, merchandising partnerships with the retailer, all kinds of good stuff happens. So these are really what we're driving towards, is how do I allocate resources better? How do I drive a deeper partnership with my retailer? And I'm biased on this, but I think data is the way to do that. So this slide here shows you kind of the path we're going to talk about on this platform. It's all machine learning based, and there's really three primary steps that we go down to try and figure this stuff out. The first one is we enrich all of your point of sale data, okay? Obviously, there's a reason I'm partnered with Krunchbox on this. They are really good at managing all that point of sale data for you, making it available to you in a visual fashion. So we're going to enhance that, and I'm going to tell you how we're going to do that here in just a second. Then we go through and cluster and segment all of your stores based on that data. So we take this system of 5,000 locations and break it up into 4 types of stores or 6 types of stores or whatever the number ends up being. So that no longer are you trying to make a decision on 5,000 locations. It's, oh, I really have 4 types of stores that I need to build strategies around, and here's what those strategies should be. And then we do the fancy stuff, which is forecasting. We're not going to talk a ton about forecasting on this call just because we don't have time, but that's vision into the future, right? So once I have my segments together, I understand the world. What can I expect out of this, and how do I meet that expectation? All right. One of the coolest things of this is the data enrichment piece. So I want to spend a little bit of time here. So imagine if you're in, let's just say Home Depot and Lowe's. Imagine drawing a 3, 5, 10-mile radius around every location that you have product in and pulling back hundreds and hundreds of data attributes about the people in that trade area. Okay, trade area is that radius around the store, the people who are most likely to shop at that store. That would be pretty valuable, right? Things like demographic information like household income, how many people are in the home, how old is the home, the types of things they spend money on, but also really cool stuff around like weather, landscape patterns and behaviors like flood risk, building permits, all kinds of stuff, marital status, crime, politics, all kinds of stuff is sitting in this data library ready for you to use in this, this whole process we're talking about here. So that's our first step. We go through, we take that point of sale data. Luckily, hopefully all of you are Krunchbox customers. You understand how important all of that is. So I'm not even going to talk about the point of sale world, but we're appending data to that. We're taking this really long data set and we're stretching it out really wide with additional attributes, okay? The next step is that clustering step. And I'm not going to talk about each of these algorithms, but we have a series of algorithms that are built specifically for the retail world. Things like, where's my areas of growth? Where are my areas of risk, which everybody wants to know, but also like algorithms for very specific things. So if you're getting ready to go into new stores within a current retailer, you're expanding markets, you're going into a brand new retailer, or you are launching a new SKU, we've got algorithms built specifically for those. Like if I'm going to launch a new SKU and I'm going to put a support plan around that SKU to make it successful, where do I allocate that resource, right? Where do I put that support plan? Marketing targeting from a marketing and advertising perspective, even inventory allocation. The supply chain is always a problem, right? It's always something we're working on. There are algorithms in this platform built specifically for that world as well. Okay, and then we forecast based on opportunity. We're looking for growth and risk, right? Where is my potential? What's my potential? And how do I get there? And then on the risk side, where is the downside that I need to be concerned about? How do I avoid from that risk actually taking place and hurting me? Okay, so that's just tip of the iceberg, top level summary on what everything is. But I think it'll get real when we start talking about a real example. So this here is it's a brand sold in Lowe's, and it's like a hose and pipe fittings manufacturer. So obviously we started with all of their point of sale data for Lowe's. They're in a lot of other retailers, but this analysis was just on Lowe's. And like these charts here, probably something similar to what you've seen before, right? On this map, it doesn't, like, this map isn't here for you to like try and figure out what this is actually telling you, but it's chaos, right? The map on the left is actually showing you sales and year-over-year growth for every store, for every Lowe's location across the country for this product. this product category. The scatter chart on the right is showing you the same data. It's crazy, right? You look at this, it's like, how do I make a decision around where I should spend my effort? Where do I spend my time so that I increase the velocity of the product and I make my retailer and my buyers at the retailer happy? Just starting here, like it's a big hurdle. And so in this situation, we went into that enrichment step, and here you're looking at a sample of some of the data attributes that we pulled for every Lowe's location, right? You see demographic stuff in here. You see like how old the housing units are. You also see things like how close is the nearest Home Depot? How close is the nearest Menards? How close is the nearest Ace Hardware? How many Ace Hardwares are there within a 5-mile radius, right? We know those things are everywhere. That stuff impacts the performance of your product in that retailer, right? If you've got a Lowe's location that's out on an island and there's really not another home improvement store nearby, that store will perform differently than one that has a Home Depot and an Ace Hardware within 2 miles, right? People have options that impacts your performance, and it might impact how you approach tackling that store, okay? You see things like generation populations, renter versus occupied housing units, very different in how they shop at those stores. Crime, diversity, age, like there's even fancy stuff in here like daytime versus resident population. Those are very different too, right? If you've got a Lowe's that's in an area with a lot of residents around it, that will have a different product mix as far as a sales perspective goes than a location that's like in a business district, which there's a lot of those too, okay? All of this stuff is just making that data set smarter so we can get to this next step, which is where we cluster and segment this big network of Lowe's has 17 or 1,800 locations into a few categories that we can now start to make decisions around, okay? So instead of going into Lowe's in my line review or my quarterly business reviews and saying, hey, my product is great, it's selling really well, we're gonna keep doing what we're doing. Now I'm able to walk in with, hey, my product is great, it's selling really well in these areas, and I have some work to do in these areas, and here's what I'm doing. I can tell you with absolute certainty, the people you're talking to are going to love stuff like that if you're not already doing this. So here in this situation, again, sold in Lowe's, hose and fittings manufacturer. There actually were 4 types of stores in just this first cluster we did. So this cluster was focused on growth. Okay, where are my areas that I should be looking at for growth? Usually we do a lot of different segmentation exercises for any project. 4 clusters. Part of this clustering work, we do a lot of work around correlating all of these different attributes to understand what actually impacts your sales, right? So yes, your contextual data, sales team activity, marketing activity, all that stuff is going to have some impact. And in a normal situation, we didn't have that in this example, but in a normal situation, that would be another data attribute that we process as part of this project. In this case, we were actually only looking for trade area variables that impact sales. And in this case, kind of interesting, what correlates really well to sales is lower median household income, okay, on the low, actually below the average, okay, older homes, like 45 to 60-year-old homes, and slow or no population growth, okay? That was actually an interesting insight that wasn't expected, because if you think about any project, like you want to, or any product, you want to be in areas where there's a lot of activity, right? People spending a lot of money, lots of growth, lots of new houses being built. In this product circumstance, that's not the case. In those areas, this product performs the worst. They perform the best in these older, established areas, lower income, where the theory is a lot of retrofitting is taking place, right? We're replacing a lot of stuff inside of a house or an apartment. So that's interesting. So now we can start to cluster stores based on those criteria, and that's what you see here. Cluster 3 is actually their strongest performing cluster. The average revenue of a store in cluster 3 is $21,000 a year, and that's about 320 stores, okay? Cluster 4 and cluster 2 are their lowest performing group. And actually, cluster 1 is a low performing group. But what's interesting about cluster 1, if I hop to this next slide here, that is where all of their growth opportunity is. Okay, again, just in this like tip of the iceberg look, there's a lot more we do. So if you look at this now, I've got 320 stores in this protect group that's like, hey, these stores have the right recipe of trade area attributes that is conducive for selling my product, and I'm performing really well there. I need to protect what I've got, right? So that's one approach. Just retain what I have. Let's not try and push them further. Let's just protect our position in those stores. Cluster 1 is where all my growth opportunity is. Oddly enough, there's 843 stores in this cluster. It's a big group of stores that I can actually start to do some fancy stuff around. The reason that there's growth opportunity here is because the recipe in the trade area, older homes, slow population growth, also competition is actually relatively low with these stores, which is interesting. But I have a lot of growth opportunity because that trade area is conducive to selling my product. I'm just not executing yet. So now you can imagine where you can go with this, right? Well, what's going on in those stores? Why haven't we been executing? There's all kinds of next steps you can take from this point. But even just here for this brand, it was an $8 million opportunity, and this is on about a $25 or $30 million brand. So it's a large chunk. Even if we're half wrong, right? Even if we go down this path and we're half wrong, it's still a large amount of money, still a large increase that we can go after. Okay. So cluster 1 is the one like, hey, if we're planning new objectives, merchandising, marketing, sales team, field sales, all kinds of stuff, let's put it against cluster 1 and see if we can move the needle. Cluster 3, we're protecting what we've got. Cluster 2 and cluster 4 are on cruise control, right? Minimum level of support. I just need to retain what I've got. We don't want to lose ground, but like the trade areas in these stores are not conducive to selling my product. So let's just retain what we've got. We're happy there. Okay. Let's take a year. Let's push cluster 1 as far as we can and see how we did. Again, take this to the retailer, right? The retailer loves this kind of stuff. Usually what we'll do is now at this point, we'll take cluster 1 and we will actually segment cluster 1 out. We'll find the stores that have maximum opportunity and the stores that have the least amount of opportunity. And then you get even smarter about how you allocate and what you do, right? The whole point of this is, okay, well, is it marketing that's my problem? Is it my merchandising strategy in the store? Is it some type of seasonal variable that I'm just not capturing, which in this case, that was a big factor. There's all kinds of things that you start to tease out at the next layer once you even just understand this piece. Okay, hopefully that makes sense. So now that's cool, right? Clustering's cool. We haven't talked about forecasting, which is where we really start to predict what the future opportunity is. But another thing that's great, once we've done all this enhancement work, right? So we've done it. We've added all these crazy variables to the data set. The data set is much smarter. We do all this clustering work, but this data set is an asset in itself, right? So even something as simple, what you're looking at on screen here is that same store network. You're looking at sales, but in this case, sales are normalized for population. So now you're looking at sales per capita, okay? The red dots, don't look too closely, but the red dots are where my sales per capita is the highest. That's where I'm performing the best as far as the number of people in that trade area. That's one attribute that we just layered into sales, right? So now, like what happens all the time here is everybody's biggest state is Texas, right? Texas and California, sometimes Florida. The most people live in those states. So of course, there's also a lot of stores. So we look at those states and you look at, you typically look at a map of the country and you see, oh, Texas, California, and Florida are my biggest states. A lot of times when you normalize those states for population, they aren't. The smartest way to do it is to do it the way that we do it, which is normalize for the population around each of your locations that you're in. Okay, that's how we get super smart. So now I'm looking at this, I'm like, whoa, some of my biggest stores are not actually leveraging the people they have to sell to at the rate of some of these other stores. So now I start saying, okay, well, what's unique about these stores that are really, really high on the per capita spectrum? And why are some of these stores that are low on that spectrum that I think should be performing better, not performing at that level, right? So it becomes a snowball, right? We get smarter, We started asking smarter questions. We had just one more data point. Now we're much smarter, and you're off to the races, and crazy, exciting stuff starts to happen. Okay, so hopefully that made sense. Doug, I'm going to hand it back over to you at this point and talk about next steps and contact and that whole world.
Well, Zach, that was great. I hope everyone on the call got to see a little bit about what is possible. And again, we're just scratching the surface here. I'm excited about the opportunity for our customers to be able to go to their retailer with a really well thought out, data-backed plan of suggestions and how they can attack the marketplace a little bit more strategically. It's always not about, getting your retailer to buy more, although they might with a well thought out plan. It's about ensuring that you have the right amount of product in the right stores and being able to segment those stores. Because we know from working with all our suppliers, one of the challenges they all have is managing out of stocks. And it's the same stores every week, same stores, same products. They never get enough facings or enough inventory support from the retailer. And I think being able to go to that buyer, merchant, planner with a plan that says, okay, here's our plan for this year. We're going to actually sell or use the same amount of open to buy money. The difference is we're going to keep turning that inventory over and over and over again, right? So instead of turning our inventory 4 times a year with this strategic plan, we think we can turn it 6 times a year and sell more items more frequently and limit our out of stock. So I'm excited about your capabilities here and how you can help our customers and use our data and your data together to create a clear picture of where the potential lies within their retail partners.
Like totally. And if I could just add one piece to that, Doug, on the inventory piece, add to that the regional component, right? Because if you're going after a certain part of the country or a certain set of stores, now you are even smarter. It's like, hey, let's go with our original plan in, cluster 3, 4, and 5, but let's heavy up in cluster 1 and 2 or whatever.
Yeah, and look, this crosses many parts of the business. Whether they have, merchandising teams that are visiting stores. Are you going to put any merchandisers in your low opportunity stores? You should start to think about where you're going to get your biggest bang for the buck from that, where you're putting your end caps, where you're spending your promotional dollars, where you're doing your web advertising, right? If you can geolocate web ads on a Lowe's site or a Home Depot site, let's do it in the areas that have the best potential. Otherwise, you're kind of just throwing that money into the wind. I think Ryan was monitoring the chat and had some questions. If anyone has any questions, if the chat works, great. If not, you can email them over to rsmits@krunchbox.com if there's anything on top of mind right now. Ryan, what do you got?
Yeah, I've got a few questions here. I'm just going to pull them up. There's some have been kind of asked twice, so I'll just summarize those ones. So if it's not the exact wording that you have, I'll just take into account I've summarized some of them into one question. So one of the questions was on slide 4 or 5, you went through quite a lot of data sets. So what are some of the other data sets you have access to, and what's the most interesting one for you personally?
Good question. So yes, so as far as the data, there are literally thousands of data points. Okay, I don't want to say it's endless, but there is so much data available. And so a large portion of our data actually comes from the US government and other countries' governments. And you think about the Census Bureau, the American Community Survey. These are data sets that are available. They're traditionally really hard to use, and they're almost impossible to use in the format that we're using them. So drawing this 3-mile radius, pulling back just that store's trade area. But those are rich in, of course, like who's in the area, but also how they spend their money, how they spend their time, right? How much, what is their commuting pattern? That's a data point in this data set. Okay, so that's personally my favorite. There's a big consumer segmentation in there too. But another one that I see that we use all the time is weather. So we process all the NOAA's weather data, and we pull that for every store. If you have a product that has any sort of seasonality to it or impact of weather, which in the home improvement space is a lot of products, that's one we use a lot. We use it both for the sales correlation piece, but we've also used it for new SKU planning, right? So an example I can think of is I planned a mosquito product, brand new mosquito product from a big company. hadn't had a lot of success with mosquito products in the past. We used weather data as well as some other sales stuff to predict when that product was going to be strongest in different areas of the country, right? You think about mosquitoes, they come on really strong in Texas a lot earlier than they do in Kansas, right? The further north you go, the different the patterns are. So if you're thinking about launching a new product, you're working with a retailer on it, that impacts inventory, it impacts the merchandising plan, it impacts the marketing plan, all kinds of stuff, rather than just walking in saying, we've got this amazing new product, we need to get it out in every store, but retailer, how can you help me? It's a totally different conversation.
Yeah, makes sense. I will preface this question by just stipulating to the person who asked it. It does depend on what you're asking for. But one of the questions was, what's the typical onboarding time to start seeing results and start seeing data published?
Good question. So yes, it does depend on how deep we're going. But so I kind of glossed over this. This stuff is built for a very specific purpose. And the reason we did that is because we wanted it to be fast. Usually clients start seeing insight in 2 to 3 weeks after we receive your data. And so that's one of the benefits for everybody on this call. You're already with Krunchbox. I work with a lot of clients that they don't even have their point of sale data like processed and pulled. And so we have to go through that whole process. So that's gonna speed things up even further. But once basically Magnetic gets their hands on your data, it's 2 to 3 weeks to when you first start seeing some insight, and then the full project is usually finished inside of 2 months.
Excellent. And then the final question here: in your experience, how receptive are buyers to this information?
You want me to answer that first, Doug, and then you can add some commentary? So I actually first started doing this about 7 years, a little over 8 years ago, for prior employers. And I was working with a very large company here in the US. And when I started working with them, we actually didn't really expect anything to come of it. We were doing a bunch of analytics work for their internal team. And then they started using that in their presentations with Walmart, Home Depot, Lowe's, Menards. And they were coming back to me like, the retailer is loving this stuff. They're like, we're getting all kinds of merchandising partnerships and marketing partnerships that we were not getting before, because now, guys, and this was a huge company. If I said the name, everybody would know it. And so that was like, holy cow, there's something here. And then I can tell you, every time we've done this since then, it's been similar results. The retailers love this stuff. And it's because they expect you to be using your point of sale data. They make this stuff available for a reason, right? They expect you to be using it to get smarter, to make them smarter so that their category performs better. Doug, do you have anything to add to that?
Look, I think we all say at Krunchbox, if you want your retailer to do what you want them to do, you need to be able to go to them with a fairly well thought out program and plan, right? And there's no one on this call that doesn't know that. Mm-hmm. So I think just being able to go and take the data that they provided the supplier and then layer in some more fascinating information from my viewpoint creates a, kind of that winning pitch, right? So here's why I need more inventory support. Just does not go because it fixes out of stocks. It also fixes the fact or isolates the fact that these are my high pot stores. This is where we're going to drive revenue for both of us. And I think that should be received by the retailer with some open ears, right? We often hear the retailer won't listen to me. And we always kind of go back with, well, they might if you had something really good to talk about. And I think
right.
this is the piece that's really good to talk about. It's really fascinating information. The one thing I will ask Zach before we go is, what is the output? So what does the customer get at the end of this, if anyone wants to go down the path of analyzing a retailer and their data sets?
Yeah, so it depends a little bit on the project, but at a minimum, you're getting, if I get really tactical for a second, you're getting a deck with all of the insight that was found in the analysis. That's to kind of inform all the decision making. That's to share internally with other stakeholders. That's really like the path that we need to go down to maximize what we're trying to do. But on top of that, for any cluster that's built, there's a profile built for that cluster as well. So it's great to know that, okay, there's 800 stores in this cluster, but what's unique about those stores? Why should I care about it? What's all the detail around it? Think of that as like you've probably all seen an infographic of like a consumer segment. It's the same style, but for stores. And then you also get a really rich data set back. So like we spend all this time enriching the data set, and it's more than just appending data. It's also, we calculate a bunch of custom metrics on top. You get that data set back for inclusion into any like internal finance teams, internal analytics teams, forecasting that you do internally, so that's in most projects, that's the three big ones.
And it can be easily brought into Power BI, Tableau,
Totally.
whatever BI tool they're using there.
Totally.
All right, well, that's our half hour. Our 20 minutes turned into 30, but that was a great conversation. Hopefully everyone enjoyed what they heard on our call today. For more information, you can email myself or Ryan. We'll set up a introductory chat and figure out what the parameters are, what you'd like to achieve. We'll loop Zach in and we'll get you some more information on your project budgets, etc. But Zach, I'm excited about what you're going to allow our customers to do in conjunction with us. I think it's a fantastic partnership, and look forward to leveraging your knowledge and your experience at helping our suppliers become better partners to the retailers and ultimately grow sales and turn more inventory.
Absolutely. Appreciate it.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks,
Enjoy
everyone.
the rest of the day.